Right. Let's get started. Still got a few people joining. Um, so thanks everyone for coming today. Really pleased to have our friends from CyberUp here today and their employer partners. So they're going to talk today about the challenges employers are facing with hiring and how skills-based hiring and apprenticeships can help fill that gap. So first, we're going to hear from Tony Bryan, who's the exec director of CyberUp, on why what's the need, why do we need to embrace skills-based hiring, and then we're going to bring in CyberUp's employer partners. So we've got Alan Berry with Centene, Christy Cook, Peabody Energy, and Raphael Constantine with Barry Wemiller. And they're going to talk about their experiences with apprenticeships, how they've worked with an intermediary like CyberUp, and how that makes it work. Just a bit of housekeeping before we start. As always, we'll be recording this and put it on our website afterwards. Share that around, and then we'll have some time at the end for questions for Tony and the panel. So please put your hand up to make a comment or ask a question, or you can put things in the sidebar as we go along. We'll try and come back to them. So that's everything I was going to say up front. So I will pass over to you, Tony. So,
You pass it over to me, Harry? All right. Can you pull up the slide deck for me just real quick? That'd be great. Well, good afternoon or good morning. Again, we're Harry, as Harry stated, wherever you guys may be. For those that don't know, my name is Tony Bryan. I'm the executive director of CyberUp. Um, for context, CyberUp is a nonprofit. We're headquartered in St. Louis, Missouri. Um, our mission is, we recruit, train, and place folks into paid apprenticeships. We've done that for the past 8 years. We were one of the first cybersecurity registered apprenticeship programs. So I've been at this game quite a few years, and seen a lot of ups and downs and had a lot of conversations with employers. So what I hope we are able to accomplish today over the next hour or so, or 45 minutes, is to establish a really solid foundation on what skills-based hiring is. Next slide, please. Um, what skills-based hiring is, why it is important to not just to us, but also to our country, right? A lot of the things I think we've all been seeing. How to build a skills-based program. We'll dive really quickly into that, but a lot of that's going to come through the conversations we have with Alan, Christy, and Raphael today, which we'll get some introductions here in just a few minutes. But from level set, I want to make sure I always a fan of just defining words, right? I know there's been a big rush into the world of apprenticeship and workforce development. There's been a very large increase in cybersecurity programs over the last 8 years. There's a lot of stats out there. So I just always like to make sure that when we do have opportunities that we say the same words and have opportunities to define that. So skills-based hiring is a big one. We've heard a lot of words around skills gap, talent crisis, soft skills, power skills, a lot of things around skills, but we really haven't necessarily defined or could do a better job of defining what that is. So next slide, please. So what is skills-based hiring? So this is a very basic, good old-fashioned Webster definition that we use, but I think it's a really important word and foundation. So I'm going to read it just so we're all on the same page. There's a recruitment practice that involves hiring applicants based on their quantifiable skills rather than assessing them purely based on their resumes or degrees, right? I know there's been a lot of opportunities and products that have been created over the last several years to do different things like that, but I think most of you would agree that the general practice and for most organizations, degree requirements are still prevalent for many companies, and we're still working to find ways to change that. Next slide, please. So I'm going to give a quick couple of bases of what are the advantages here, but then I also want to dive into just a little bit more about like why we should embrace it, how we got here, and beyond that. So you're not going to me give you a return on investment, an ROI of $1.45 or whatever it is right now. But this is what we have found time and time again. What I think you're going to hear from our employer partners is what is the advantages here. So definitely increases your quality of hire. Not just from a perspective of like their skills are coming at, but from diversity of just range, age, gender, race. There's so many different things here that we're measuring, and we're working to base off on hiring here. But by adding skills-based hiring and looking at different pools, it does create a much wider range in which you're pulling from, and really changes the makeup of your team to create a more well-rounded, inclusive environment there. Um, it does expand your talent pool, right? I come back and we're going to jump in a little bit deeper into it here in a little bit of like why this is important. And we're at this interesting crossroads, I think, of our country right now to really lean into how we have to change and start to really address our talent pool over the next several years, right? I think there's a lot of factors that are working behind the scenes that we're going to have to really dive into. Definitely supports inclusion efforts, right? That's an easy kind of describable thing. Employee retention and engagement. We specifically talk around cyber, but I know AFA covers broadly apprenticeships for all sorts of topics here. But we have found that just through bringing in different backgrounds, especially around that apprenticeship aspect, where folks are coming in maybe non-traditional places and are just appreciative of the opportunities that are given to those folks, we have found it really does have a big impact of just team culture as a whole. And really brings in a whole new environment, I think, for folks to gather around. And then last but not least, I think the bottom line here is it does increase teams' productivity and profitability. It is important, right? If there are ways for an employer to reduce cost, increase headcount, and still meet mission, right? Like that's always a positive here. If there are programs in which, like apprenticeship, can support those things, most companies we have found have been on board if we're able to simplify, minimize risk, make some of this a little bit easier, and try to take out some of, I want to say the red tape, but some of the confusion that comes along into these things. And that's where the value of an intermediary like a CyberUp really comes in because we could think about those things for you. Next slide, please. So really, why should we embrace this? Diving just a little bit more into the stats, right? Recently, Deloitte created a report, that the companies that do embrace skills-based hiring, 52% more innovative, 57% more agile. I don't know how you're 107% of anything, but you're 107% more likely to place talent effectively with a little bit of strategy. And then you really, I think the big part, and I foot stopped a little bit earlier, is this idea of retaining your high performers, right? Those folks that you're investing in that come from non-traditional backgrounds are, again, grateful and loyal for the organization that gave them that opportunity, and they have a tendency to stay and oftentimes pay it forward to reinforce that culture you've created through skills-based hiring and how they grow into your teams. But a lot of great opportunities there. So next slide, please. So into the more realistic kind of baseline here of where we've come, and I think we find ourselves at this interesting crossroads. As a country, we've really created a perfect storm, right? We've got this idea of individuals who are picking skills paths, right? So, we just graduations are happening all across the country right now. So kids are in the very moment of trying to figure out what they want to be with the rest of their lives and are being inundated, hopefully, with lots of options and between community colleges and trade schools and four-year programs and non-traditional pathways, they have lots of options they're looking at. But in the reality is most people are looking for the quickest path to the most financially advantageous job and career that they could get, where they can find some form of purpose and happiness and not be miserable for the rest of their lives, right? Like that sounds, it's a little Debbie Downer, but that's really what I think most people want is to find some skills, concrete skills, to get a role, to support their family, feel value when they come to their employer. But within this storm here we have is this idea of we've been told for quite a few years, you go to college, you get this degree, you get this job, and that job equals $100,000, right? That's the path to six figures. You're going to get this career. And what we're finding is that's getting harder and harder, right? Like the degrees are getting different. We've expanded all types of career paths and options and degrees that you can make and zippity zip different things. So there's a lot of expectations of like, hey, you get this piece of paper, it's going to equal this to an employer. And that should equal a high salary expectation, but that's not the reality they're doing. So that's leading to a lot of frustration and anger. I'm sure you all are seeing from folks applying for jobs or just on the internet. I think I was scrolling through TikTok the other day and a guy had shared he had applied for 3,000 jobs over the last several months and has had 3 responses, right? So he's not isolated. There are a lot of people in that scenario. Because again, they've checked boxes, they've done what they've been told for the past 15, 20, 30 years. Why isn't this working? And in fact, I think there's a natural vibe or inclination to like, oh my gosh, this American dream we've had is not there for us. We're going to have to go find different ways to go accomplish those results. So on the flip of that, really is the employer side, right? So these individuals are creating these degrees. They have these high expectations, and employers are really trying to make educated business and financial decisions of how they need to grow their team smartly. What is the strategy, intentionality behind that? Also, while trying to balance these high expectations of difference of opinions of where each organization should be, so that does start that relationship off. We'll call it a rocky start, right? Of how they're building that out. And I think the biggest thing that really comes out, and I would even almost add probably beyond just pay discrepancies, the idea of work-life balance. There's this huge return to work office push, and all these different things that are now factoring into people's career choices. But companies are still trying again to balance out individual expectations, their own needs and desires, and you throw in a federal level of uncertainty that's kind of stacked on top of those three things. There really is a lot of opportunity here for some disconnect. And then just for a skill path, I didn't define it in this one. I shortened this deck, but a skill path is any group that's giving training or education to an individual that's helping them towards a career, right? Back to college, community colleges, trade school, whatever. We're also part of this equation, right? We have also perpetuated this idea of you come to us, we give you the skills, you're going to get a job, right? So we have to make sure we're staying up to date on our content. We are being responsive to employers' changes, right? I can't think of the last session I've attended that I've not heard the two letters of AI and the impact it's going to have on tech jobs. So what we're being asked to do over the last 8 years has changed a little bit on cyber. Things like operational technology, OT, AI, cloud. There's all of these things that we have to continually update and keep our skill sets broad. Some groups can do that quicker than others, right? Academic institutions or state level schools. There's a lot of paperwork to get those curriculums done. For pathways like us or boot camps, there's a little bit quicker pace in which you could change those curriculums, but very important that we need to keep those. So we're staying responsive, not just to the companies, but also making sure we're helping meet individuals' expectations as well. And then last not least, there's just a lot of us to choose from, right? What's the right path for somebody where they're trying to get into this career? And what makes them choose that one or the other? Oftentimes it's going to be cost, right? I think is the biggest contributing factor for an organization or what somebody's going to do. But the other parts is to me are pace in which I learn, um, how I learn as an educator, and what's going to be the outcome there, what's going to lead me to a job or a role as quickly as possible. So a lot of great information here. Um, I'm going to take it even one step further. So next slide, just to kind of paint some perspective that it's getting harder, right? So you take those factors of just individual expectations from individuals, companies, and training providers to this glob of four kind of key topics here that really have changed over the last 4 or 5 years. We have 5 generations in the workforce, right? And I know we talk about that, but there are generational differences between somebody in their 60s to somebody who is 22, and we're taking a hiring approach broad enough to fill all of those people, right? And so between the five of them, each of them have a different perspective. There's a different priority. Some want to have purpose, and the money's not as important to those. So like, there's a lot of variables in here that we have to start addressing to really be successful in building skills-based hiring programs. The other part, I mean, I'm sure you guys have watched the news. I try not to, but it gets thrown at my face more often than I'd like to. College value, uh, is dropping according to news right here, where just the idea of degrees is changing. You're seeing schools are reimagining programs. Some schools are closing doors. I know here in St. Louis, we've had a university who's closing here shortly because of demands and just programs that have grown. So, what are companies doing at this moment as we look to see more colleges maybe not having as many enrollments in the next couple of years? That impacts the workforce in the next 4 to 5. So we have to start making decisions today about that workforce is going to look like coming into our offices in the next 4 or 5 years. And the last two really are kind of, are byproducts of COVID. So the gig economy, I know we've seen millions of people are out of work. I'm very interested to see as student loans start to be recollected, if that has an impact on gig economy jobs, because there's a lot of people out of the workforce that I think have a tendency could possibly go back into it. But employers are competing against things like drop shipping, Amazon, the idea of being your own boss and creating your own hours and times and door dashing, where you can make $60,000 a year and not have to go into an office and some of those other things to be able to do it. So they're both good. It's just I think companies have to think through that as truly their competition has changed and roles. It's not just the company across the street is, DoorDash and the other things. And the last but not least is this idea of remote work. Centene for Allen, their team has gone fully remote. Other organizations, are a hybrid, and some are every day in the office. So I don't know what the right answer is. I don't have a good recommendation here, but I know remote work and that option is definitely going to change the workforce from now into the future. Just because I think it's an expectation right now. It's not really an entitlement or a privilege to have it. It really is a nice to have, but I'm very curious to see how that impacts longer down the road. So, any questions over that? I want to pause because I just do a lot of information at you, and we're going to jump into the questions with the panelists here. But I want to make sure to leave some room. If there's anything anybody would like to add or ask, or on the last couple slides we just covered. Awesome. Well, good deal. Next slide, please. So with that, I'm very excited, right? We've got three really great partners, and I want to set the stage here of why I chose these three. There's, again, a takeaway here is I want everybody to leave here, go out, have a conversation with the current employer, and feel more confident what you're going to ask of that person, because you're going to gain some information, I hope, from us of some best practices or things we've seen work. The three organizations here, we have built three very different models in which we've delivered apprenticeship with these three organizations as an intermediary, but really have leaned in and addressed what are their current needs, what works within their confines and the structure of their organization, and most importantly, what's going to work for them in their hiring practices, right? Like at the end of the day, we're all here as apprenticeship programs really to be aligned to support our employer needs. So if we're not asking those questions, we're asking those really hard questions of how to serve them better, we have to start leaning into those things. So with that being said, I'm going to start just in order of the pictures to have each individual introduce yourself, your company, and really just give some perspective of how big and structured your team is, because I think that's an important part here as we dive into the conversation. So I'll start with you, Alan.
Thanks, Tony, and thanks, everyone. So Alan Berry, I'm the CISO for Centene. If you've never heard of Centene, don't worry. We're in healthcare insurance, but we don't market under the name Centene. So depending on the state you live in, you'll know us as something different. Florida is Sunshine State, Texas is Superior Health. If you buy our ACA product, that's known as Ambetter. If you're a NASCAR fan, we sponsor a NASCAR race under the Ambetter logo, so you'll see that. I've been with Centene probably about 7.5 years, and we're a fairly large, mature organization. So Tony said he got three different kinds or flavors. I'm the big boys. We're a $160 billion company. I've got 350 FTE on my team, another 110 contractors. So yeah, we're the much larger operation, and we hire about 8 apprentices a year from the CyberUp channel.
Thank you, Alan. Christy.
Hi, Christy Cook. I lead the cybersecurity team at Peabody Energy. Peabody is a global mining company. Specifically, we're coal miners. And so while we're global, we primarily operate within the United States and Australia. So we are what we'd probably consider a mid-sized company, right? So we have approximately 10,000 users between full-time and contractors. As you can imagine, coal mining fluctuates. So there's a lot of different models depending on where we're at geographically on how we support those mine sites. But with that, my team specifically is made up of 10 people globally. And so I have employees under me both in the United States and Australia. And so we kind of rotate apprentices as we kind of see the need coming based on how technology changes, how the company changes, through time. But I'd say we probably go through 1 to 2 apprentices a year to every other year. But what we also do is we tend to bring apprentices on as we see a potential full-time need in the future. And so we use them directly as a pipeline, as a way to fill our potential needs that we see coming 2 to 3 years down the road.
The one thing I would add, and just as a foot stamp here, so Peabody has hired apprentices that we have found that have gone through our pre-apprenticeship program, and I've also found folks that were connections to their team or met through other channels that they were registered them into our apprenticeship program. So back to the skills path, and we didn't dive into that. Skills are skills, jobs are jobs. So we just want to make sure we're supporting employer partners there to get what they need in those pieces. So, and with that, Raphael, I'll pass it to you to close it up.
Hey, thanks, Tony, and nice job of the past 10 minutes introducing this whole topic, giving good context around it. So yeah, I'm the CISO here at Barry Waymiller. Been in this role for about 7 years now, and I am the first CISO. Before me, there was not even an independent security team. I was asked to stand up the team 8 years ago. And by the way, Barry Waymiller, 13,000 employees, about half of whom are here in the US. Another big chunk are in Europe, with decent sized footprints in Asia and India, China, Japan specifically. And we make big machines that we sell to other businesses. So when Alan says that maybe you don't know Centene, no one knows Barry Waymiller, because we don't sell, you don't see us advertising anywhere. We don't sell products to people like us. Yeah, we're in 25 countries, by the way, at 150 locations all around the world. Team of 14 now, but 8 years ago it was 1. And I ran into Tony by accident in a gathering, InfraGard gathering, I think it was, probably a few months after I started. And I really liked his idea of the Cyber Apprentice program. And shortly after, we hired our first apprentice. And since then, we've hired 5 others over the past 8 years. And it's been a really good journey. We bring them here into our St. Louis office. I do have other security team members also in the UK and Germany and India as well. But we bring them all in here. And what we do, we're fairly, I'll say, loosely organized, a little bit security team. So I'm able to offer the apprentice to specialize in one area, but then he or she can pick other security areas they want to get involved with, because they are an apprentice. They want to learn. They want to learn a lot more than this, I think anyway, just being pigeonholed into one discipline in security. And my hope is that if and when they leave our team, they'll have a really good idea of what they really want to do in the security fields. We try to give them a really broad exposure, but yeah, look forward to talking more about the program as we go through some more questions here.
Those are great overviews, and I appreciate that, and I'm excited to dive into it, because each group has done this a little bit different in scale and probably investment, and not just time, but also energy and money, right? So I just want to make sure that there's a footstep there. So if we want, do you mind taking the slides down so we get full screens for everybody's? There we go. Handsome faces and beautiful faces. So we'll jump in, and I'm going to start with you, Raphael. What challenges were you facing? I mean, one, you just said you were building a team, but what challenge were you facing, if any, in hiring and retaining your talent before getting involved in doing an apprenticeship?
Yeah, I'll just say we were a very new team. I think we had 3, maybe 3.5 people on the team at the time. And by the way, manufacturing is unregulated. We are a private held company, so further unregulated. I didn't have any downward directive laws that says that this company that I work for has to do certain or any security work. So everything I wanted to do, I had to build a business case around. And so the idea of a cyber apprentice was it helped me get past the funding problem that I did have. I didn't have a lot of money coming toward me from the company because, again, it was almost at that time, we're talking, what, 2018, 2019, security in my area was optional. Did not have to do it. In Al's area and Chrissy's area were regulated. Not much choice. You had to do certain things, but we didn't. And so it helped me, Tony, from a funding standpoint, get past that. And once we hired our first person, you may remember him well. He did really, really well here. And that was critical, because then he made my future business cases that much easier. And it's just the program, just in my situation, it kind of built on itself. We had such good success with our first apprentice. getting someone, getting approval for the follow-on apprentices over the years has not been a problem. And it's worked out really well. I think we're fortunate that it worked out that way, but thinking that, as I say that, the following for apprentices were also really good. Any of them could have also done the program really good justice and helped me with that business case in the years out.
I do want to add just real quick as a foot stomp that for each of the apprentices of all three of these organizations, yes, we're using the word apprentices, but for their end and internally, those were all full-time employee FTEs for those organizations. We're not treated differently as an apprentice. They were all full-time employees. Just as a point of clarity, because I feel like that does come up oftentimes for folks as you're talking, and there's this perception of an apprentice as lesser than, or there's this different value to that person, just as a foot stomp there.
Hey, on that note, you remind me now, the IT department wanted to give the PC guys, they wanted to give our first apprentice a special, slim down laptop because he's just an apprentice. And so you're right, Tony, that label did cause some problems that we had to get past and explain very clearly. Okay, they're part of our apprentice program, but they are a full-time, 100% up BW, Barry Waymiller, a security team member. So please treat them accordingly.
And it's some of that is just the stigma, right? Like you want to make sure that those folks that are coming in, right? Our folks are highly motivated, well-skilled, well-trained and come in. So it's not there. So same question to you, Christy, what challenges were you, if you were facing any as you were building out your teams?
Actually a challenge I'm actually facing today, I'm going to kind of circle a little early here, is AI. So I don't know if anyone else is running into this, but we're having really good resumes come across our desks, where, students are learning to use AI effectively, but they're using it to create their resumes. And so it's really making it difficult to identify a resume today that really meets our needs versus something that is written for the position. And so it's much harder to tell on paper who's going to fit our need versus going through an apprenticeship program where I know that they have training that's supplementing what they're doing. I know that they've got the passion and the drive because they're reaching out to do, get this extra education, this extra skills. But it's also a way there's this networking aspect to it, right? So they're learning how to speak with other people. They're learning how to reach out within the industry. And so for me, going through this pipeline, I have a little bit more of an assurance of what they've been exposed to so far and what they're going to continue to be exposed, especially as it supplements what they're doing, for me. So I know that's not exactly the same problem that I had 6 or 7 years ago when we actually started this. But that's one thing where I think the apprenticeship program really does a great job, is that as technology changes, as the needs change to fill the hiring need, I'm finding new ways that this is kind of helping me get around some of the new problems that I'm running into for hiring.
Yeah, that's a great answer and appreciate that perspective. And same for you, Alan. So what challenges? And I do want to ask if you'll dive into some of the pre-work that you guys did around job roles and creating those, because I think that was such a foundational building block that I know both Raphael and Chrissy did, but at a scale of you, like as a 300 team, it puts it in perspective in a very different way.
Sure. So first, the biggest challenge I had was just resistance in HR and talent acquisition. So you touched on the label or the connotation that comes with the word apprentice. And, a lot of companies say, well, that's a college intern. No, it's not an intern. It's an apprenticeship, full-time employee. And then the risk that comes with hiring a full-time employee that is not understood or vetted. There's a concept inside the HR world that they're an unknown quantity. They may not have a college degree. Why would I want to hire them for these roles? So CyberUp actually created a model for me that now became the primary model that CyberUp uses for apprentices, and that's the contingent worker. And that took a lot of the risk out of the HR bucket, because as a contingent worker, if somebody's not working out, you just give them back to the contractor, and CyberUp is the employer of record until we decide to convert the individual to full-time. That was a huge hurdle at the very beginning, and Tony actually created that model for us. And now as a board member on CyberUp for the last several years, that's the most common model we use for every employer. The other part, though, that you touched on, Tony, is what I call the career ladder. And this really stemmed out of the Air Force. So Rafti and I were both in the U.S. Air Force, spent our adult lives in the U.S. Air Force doing cyber in the Air Force and communications. And we were very familiar with what we called the apprentice, journeyman, craftsman journey. We called it a 3, 5, and 7 level in the military. And I took that same concept and I took the work roles defined by NIST inside their NICE program. You can look that up somewhere. And said, okay, let's just create a career ladder for the entry-level analyst 1, the analyst 2, senior analyst, lead analyst, for every single job we have, every single work role. And let's figure out what skills were important at each one of those levels. What do we value? What education do we value? What certification do we value? I don't need an entry-level SOC analyst to have a CISSP. But it's really good if they have a Security Plus or GCIH for that role. That would be very attractive. So we modeled that out to give clarity. And then that became important for CyberUp because our first apprentice didn't go so well, partly COVID, partly a lack of understanding on our part, and partly just a bad fit with the individual. So we placed her incorrectly. After that, we started using that career ladder and working with Tony's team and assessing the apprentices and saying, where would this person best fit? And because we're a large organization, we have that latitude to move people around the board a little bit. Say, this person's aptitude is really vulnerability management. We're going to place them there first. This person is really more on the GRC side of the house. This person is really good with program management and details. And it could be part of their background or it could be the training they had while they were in the CyberUp program. But either way, by putting them where their aptitude fit, instead of just trying to shove them in somewhere, the success rate skyrocketed. Now we're on our 4th cohort is in training now. Out of the first 24 placements, I think we still have 22 of them. So, it's been much more successful doing it that way.
If you don't mind me jumping in real quick, I'm glad that you, am I on mute? Okay.
No, you're good.
One thing that has changed for me, so I've been in the industry for about 13 years, Peabody 10, I think I left that out, is that I came from the Army side of the house. I came from Army cyber originally. That's how I got my start. And one thing that's really different in my applicants is that what I used to have in applicants were 50 to 75% had a military background. So I had an idea of what their work experience was like. I was familiar with, when they're talking about their MOS and their skill sets, especially if they came from, the Army or the Air Force side, because, my boss, the CIO here, has an Air Force background. So we really had a good understanding of where they're coming from. Today, we have a very small percentage of former military applicants coming in. And so they're coming either straight out of high school or straight out of college, and a much smaller percentage there. So I think we have, going back to the generational change, of the different types of applicants, that's something that we are also learning to fluctuate and work with, is understanding where they are coming from as they're coming into the apprenticeships, just because our applicants now really have changed quite a bit.
I think the foot stop on the part with the job alignment between the NICE framework and those roles in this is that it set a tone from a company culture, right? It set expectations from Alan and what him and the team were expecting for folks to come in. That got set to talent acquisition folks so they could do better pre-interviews for Alan's team because they understood what was expected of them. And that actually trickled down to hiring managers. Some of the Sentient hiring managers have been incredible for us to work with because they've become internal advocates. They've had good success and they really work closely with their own interdepartmental. But tying this all back to the 4 kind of, you alluded to it, Christy, the multi-generational. If you don't have a plan, you're not going to get anywhere. And so having these job functions, whether it is what it looks like today, there's somebody in your organization or the company you want to talk to is building out a plan for this year, next year, and the year before. It's an opportunity for us as people to come in and try to help drive those things and show value, how apprenticeship is a value add to that plan, to really lean into why it should be a strategy they should be embracing and giving statistics. So I appreciate that. And I've only seen that example, I think 3 times in my 10 years of doing this right now, of like kind of mapping those roles, but it is important. And I will also just say, we've had to go back every year to the drawing board and re-advocate for that model within internally in Centene. So it's not a set it and forget it, because things evolve and budgets change and uncertainty happens, right? Like there's a lot of stuff. So it's an ongoing push to go and to grow it. As long as you deliver results, it'll pay off. So I think with that in mind, what internal stakeholders did you have to go and get buy-in from to help push this through? Because I think that's a big foot stomp that a lot of folks that are on this call are probably getting stuck. They're prospecting, they're doing a couple companies here and there, and they're like, "Great, I want you to go. You got to go talk." And it becomes, I'm reminded of the game of telephone as a kid, where you've got 30 people in a circle and you tell one, and then the message kind of dilutes a little bit every person. So where should we start? Groups here, or where did you have to go for internal buy-in? We'll start with you, Alan, this time, and we'll go backwards.
Okay. So yeah, I talked about the first hurdle of the FTE hire and the risk of hiring an FTE and being their employer. The other piece really was the job requisitions that we were using for hiring. They all said things like degree required. And a lot of our apprentices come in without that degree. Not all. I've also hired a master's graduate through CyberUp. I've hired a West Point graduate through CyberUp. So some of them had degrees, but not all. And I had to go literally fight with HR and talent acquisition to change degree required in every one of my roles. So I got them to move it to degree preferred. And I had to go change all of those certs that previous people had stuck in there because they didn't know any better, where they would have entry-level jobs with certs that were much more advanced, and get all of that and flush it out of the system. Because otherwise, individuals, not just apprentices, but anybody applying for a job, hit these walls where the recruiter just discarded them and said, nope, not qualified. And they had no idea what they're looking at. We're in a very technical career field, and they don't know the words in the job rec. And why would they? So I had to go fix that first and get that out of the system. And then you have to tend that garden, because guess what? It comes back. You turn your head, and 3 months later, and it's back in there. Degree required. It's like, I just fix this. Why is this back? You have to constantly tend that garden and make sure that they don't get in there and muck it up again. And then I had to go educate them on apprentice versus internship, because they were really stuck on that. Why would we do this through this nonprofit? We want to build relationships with these 10 schools and put all our efforts and all our eggs to these university baskets. I was like, this is not the same thing. I'm willing to do interns as well, but apprenticeships is very different, and here's why. And I had to really take a lot of time to walk those teams through that and have them understand that we're not trying to steal their jobs.
You want to go next, Christy?
Sure. So this is probably where, I kind of have an advantage being a, smaller company, right? In the mid-size, is that I have a lot more flexibility, working with HR in, the position descriptions, right? So of course they, have the final say, but, everything comes through me. And so I have a lot more flexibility in saying, required versus preferred. So whenever we started this, this journey with the apprenticeship, it was actually a pretty easy conversation, right? So whenever I came to Peabody, the security team was 3 people total. And so now we've grown to 10. But I really had to, get buy-in from HR and a little bit of that conversation of intern versus apprenticeship. But for their purposes, they're like, they saw it all as contract workers, either way. So they said, whatever you want to call them, that's fine. If they meet your needs and they meet, some of our minimum requirements, you do what you need to. And then I had to go sell it to the CFO. And honestly, it was a great conversation. They saw it as a way to support Peabody, have some flexibility in how we're hiring, but also having a little bit more of that assurance of what the skill sets we are getting. And so I think that's where, this might be an area that was easier for me because it's a little bit smaller of a company, and having a little bit more of a direct pipeline, I think, into those conversations.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. Raphael?
Yeah, so my interaction with HR is more along the lines of Christie's, probably because we're a smaller company than Al's. I had no issues whatsoever. Wrote my own job description for it. Never had any concerns from their standpoint of apprentice versus intern. I just told them I want them to be a full-time employee with all the benefits everyone else gets. And they said, okay, sounds good. We're just not paying them as much. And I also know that they're on a special apprentice program through the CyberUp. And that is what made it real easy for me to sell to my fellow IT team leaders. And by it, I mean the whole package where we get, so Al mentioned military, and I didn't realize you're in the Army, Christy, but one thing that we learn as leaders in these military branches is that you rely on the personnel pipeline to deliver you young people out of basic training to show up. They don't have many skills. They have really good attitudes for the most part. And that is what my expectation was coming out of the CyberUp program. And that's what you delivered, Tony, every time. Every person we've interviewed, we hired 5, we interviewed probably 4 times that many. We look for attitude more than anything. I can train technical skills, right? When they get here, I can figure out what they're going to do, and then we do the training part. But having your group kind of filter out and provide to us attitude, that is tremendous. And then knowing also that once they come on board with us, not only are they learning in their day-to-day job experience here with me and my team, but the program requires them to continue their self-improvement. I forget how many hours it is, but you require a certain number of hours per month, I believe, of self-education through the CyberUp offerings. You have a library of cyber things that they have to get smart on, different stage gates they have to pass. It just makes, Tony, it makes me, and for everybody, it makes the business case really easy to sell. Good attitude. They show up with 1 or 2 certifications already, so they already kind of know that this is what they want to do, and then they're going to keep getting education at least throughout that first 12 or 18 months that they're with us. It's really, the program sells itself. But Tony, I say that, you remember the first time I brought you to my company, the answer was no, right? CIO said not interested. So this is the try and try again deal. We got a new CIO about a year after that. I brought Tony back in, 180-degree difference, same message, same really good message, but our new CIO was totally on board, and that's when we hired our first one. So the context can change as well. So yeah, if it doesn't work out, dust it off, try it again at the right time. But when I think about the program and the stakeholders and selling it, I mean, the program really does a good job selling itself. And like I mentioned earlier, get that first one in the door, and then help them do really well. It just starts that motor just going. It's been really, really good. But back to my first point, it's all about the attitude, right? And it's up to us also as the leader of these teams to kind of nurture that attitude, make sure it doesn't drop off. And you do that by checking in with them a lot. Make sure everything is okay. And that's something else, Tony. Your team checks in with our apprentices. That's something I didn't know when we went through that first one. I learned later that you were checking in with them to make sure things were going okay. And I really, really appreciated that. I think that is really good because you're not just dropping them off at our door and walking away. You have clearly a solid investment and really care to how these folks perform and how they think they're being treated. Because that's important also.
The 2 things I'll add just from an employer, what I've learned recently from a employer perspective. So folks in Allen, Raphael, and Christie's shoes, specifically in cyber, is the only job in the world that if something happens bad, they're on the hook or liable for something as an individual basis, right? So you take that into perspective of trying to bring somebody into your team and organization there's a level of trust there that you have to instill into somebody because they essentially have your back and to make a decision that could have a personal impact in your life. So that changed my relationship a little bit at how I was asking those questions. And two, from a talent team, we're a threat, right? We could come in and create a solution that might, lose a head count for the talent team. So like we want them to help us, but at the end of the day, they're really afraid of us because it might actually be a hindrance. So there's that fine line of becoming an advocate and friend and not and an ally is probably a better way, an ally there with them, not to be complimentary, not counterintuitive. So we have 13 minutes. I want to ask a quick question for both. So can you share a success story, maybe a standout apprentice that demonstrates the value of the program and maybe why, just to kind of elaborate of how that worked. And I'll start with you, Raphael. You know what? We'll go with Christy first because you haven't gone first this time. We'll go Christy first, and then we'll rotate it out.
So actually, we have one of our very first apprentices. He came on board, and this was several years ago, right? This is probably 6 or 7 years ago at this point. And he's one of them that we said, hey, we've got this, this kid that's right out of college, or he's getting ready to graduate. But we think he actually might be a really good fit for cybersecurity, even though it's not what he's graduating in. He's graduating with a degree in history. But, the direction he thought he was going to go isn't quite, where he wanted to. He originally wanted to go to law school. And so, on our side, we met up with him, kind of talk the talk on cybersecurity and where we thought some of his skills would fit into this space. And so through that, he's like, okay, yeah, I'll give it a shot. That's fine. And through that, we linked him up with Tony and got him through the program, some of the early training. So I will fast forward. He finished up the program. He did really well. So we said, we just want to keep this guy. Don't have an FTE yet. So we brought him on as a contractor and continued him on. He eventually came on with Peabody as an FTE. He's worked around in a couple of different positions. He worked in our SOC. He's worked with our legal and e-discovery. He's worked with our vendor risk management, our security awareness training, a little bit of engineering. And now he's about to become a manager of his own team underneath me here in the next couple of months.
Nice. That's a long time. I remember that. I remember him vividly. It was a good story. Thanks for sharing. Alan, how about you?
We've got several really easy success stories, but one that comes to mind, an individual that actually didn't make the first cut. So as we went through the interviews with the cohort that we had trained up, we didn't select them in the first cut. And then one of the ones we did select fell out for some reason that escapes me now. So we revisited him and re-interviewed him and brought him on, really a little bit of a flyer to put him into our portfolio management function. And within a couple of weeks, we realized that was underclubbing his skill set and that he was incredibly adaptable, I guess I would say. And now that young man is a data scientist. So he is helping us build out all our data science stuff. And he actually paired up with an intern who we brought on for a summer internship. And both of them, just out of the blue, just had this amazing skill set to deal with large amounts of data. And so they're both doing data science work for us now, and they're just kicking ass and taking names and got them into an apprentice program. So go figure.
Great story. Raphael.
I'll go back to our first apprentice about 6 or 7 years ago that I mentioned a couple times. And because we allowed him very free reign, I think he was security team member number 4 at the time. We had a lot of responsibilities. We didn't have enough hours in the day. So he was given a lot of free reign to do whatever he wanted. And he wanted to do a lot, and he did it very well and very reliably. To the point where he would go to gatherings of other cyber people here in town, which we have quite a few of them. And they ask him what he's doing, and he would tell them, he goes, "What do you mean only been there 2 years and you've done all this stuff?" And that made me feel really good because thinking when he said it, like, my gosh, we have been giving you a lot of stuff. But it was really him taking it more than, it's him coming, asking for permission, going back to that attitude, yeah, I'm happy to support him and as long as things go well, and things only went well. And then he got a really good job offer and left us a couple years ago for Rapid7, and we're still in good touch. And he's doing really, really good things there. So I'm very pleased that we're able to be kind of that launch pad for that young man, Army veteran, by the way. Going back to your point, Christy, that's what they were. Back then, a lot of these folks were military vets. I haven't been tracking the kind of the fall off on that. I'll look for that. It is interesting. But yeah, so when I think about that, and like your story, Al, launching someone, taking them from just trying to get their fingers into where they can pull up and look into cybersecurity to where they're full-fledged, probably thought leaders in some cases, just in a matter of a few years, give them the chance. I'll say one other thing, how you didn't ask this question, but one way I've used CyberUp, I get a lot of people here at the office saying, hey, you know, my son, my daughter, my neighbor's friend, they want to get into cyber, but they have no experience. What should they do? Well, guess what I tell them? Tony, I give them your business card. Go talk to Tony, learn about the CyberUp program. That's the best advice. And you've gotten several referrals from me over the years. You may not know they all came from me, but I think that's also a very good use, because I don't really know what to tell all the time, tell these people. But I know that just from my experience with the CyberUp program, being that launching pad, it's a great recommendation.
I mean, the big footstop here is these are three very different examples, right? And I think as practitioners, or for those that are intermediaries, if you put ourselves in these boxes, right? Obviously, we have to meet standards and follow what we write for apprenticeship programs, but at the same time, if we're not being flexible in how we're delivering solutions to employers, we're going to lose, right? And I think unfortunately, if one of us loses, then the whole country loses, because I'm confident that this is the backbone of how we grow our cybersecurity workforce. I think traditional is doing a great job of creating a ton of people, but I think there's really a hybrid here that's going to create this success and opportunity. So with that, I'm going to pass it over for questions. If any of the folks that are on the call have a question, feel free to put it in the chat. We're going to add something, Raphael?
Not yet. Waiting for that first question.
We'll give it a half
know,
a second. Oh, go ahead.
I'll say one thing, while we're waiting on questions, I might throw in one thing I've seen. Yes, I've seen a decrease in, former military coming in, but what I've also seen is an increase in people making career changes. So one thing that I've had a ton of success with is saying, what other skill sets do I need, right? There's a big misconception, especially for, a lot of younger people, that cyber is very technical. It's all engineering. That's all it is. So it's not for me, because that's not what I am. But what I've had a huge success is saying, well, what have you done before? So maybe taking former teachers that have great soft skills, maybe really detail oriented, very analytical, looking at some of these other areas and saying, we can take the skill sets that you have now and transition you over to some other areas that might work really well in like data protection, vulnerability management, or even going down the analyst track and teaching you some of these more technical skills on that side. So someone that, like I said, we have a former teacher right now, and it's just been an amazing success story in transitioning that. And so this is where I think that bridge is in those that are looking to make that career change, but feeling like, man, maybe I missed the mark. I spent too many years in this other career. I can't start a new career. Well, they're not starting from scratch. I am using what you've done already before, your previous skills, and I'm just transitioning them to how I need them in these other gaps, in these other areas.
Yeah. It's a great question. So Rick in the chat, one concern that people raise about scaling apprenticeships is that there aren't enough financial incentives for employers. How have the panelists been addressing the ROI concerns in their organizations? Good question, Rick.
So
I know, Alan, you and I have talked about this quite a bit over the years of just your perspective, and I think it's pretty spot on.
Yeah, we haven't taken advantage of some of the tax aspects, to be honest, that we probably could. They get lost in the noise in a company with 80,000 employees when you're dealing with 3 or 4, 5, 6 people. Smaller companies really should talk with CyberUp about those tax advantages when you have a smaller outfit. But the bluntest way is just, this is inexpensive labor, not cheap labor, because they're good, but it's inexpensive labor to start. So you start off somebody that you're not paying a lot if you're hiring them through the contract model. So your hourly rate is much better than what you're going to get if you go to some staffing vendor somewhere. And it's reasonably affordable as an employer to go through this process. And then if you do convert the person, man, they get a pay raise in that deal when you convert them. And yet you took money out of the equation for the contract side. It's really just one of these perfect situations where you're giving somebody that paid apprenticeship. You're doing it at a rate that is affordable and reasonable for your company. And you're really starting somebody off in a career. And when you give them that conversion and they get that nice pay raise with that, you just blow their mind. It's amazing. And so from the economic standpoint and how you work that out, it really just, it fits in that win-win-win kind of category that you don't get very often.
I would combine, you take those concerns and you look at salaries, right? If it's somebody that's doing secure infosec is getting paid to go do some paperwork, right? It may take 5 to 10 hours to get a $1,500 tax credit where they've actually spent $2,000 in that person's time and energy and salary to go do those tax credits. So I know for us as a rule of thumb at CyberUp, we generally, if we owe a reimbursement at a pace of 2. If a company wanted to bring 2 folks on, that seems to be worth the value to that organization and to us to go and do the administrative paperwork, the upkeep that's there, because there's a nominal, ROI in that of just, of how much effort and time. But that's a big part, right? It's just is that cost savings worth? I know some states like South Carolina, St. Louis city's created some incentives here to $1,500 here or there for an apprentice, but much larger. I know as WIOA is getting put up for reconsideration, and there's some other opportunities there that this is a big area where I think we can improve as a country to help provide incentives to employers for these things. But really good question. It was asked here in the chat, what advice would you guys give to other businesses that are maybe on the fence here or fear of the complexity of things, of getting involved for other companies?
I'll just quickly answer. We've had no complexity issues whatsoever. You made it very easy for us, Tony. And like Alan mentioned, the pricing is really favorable to us in comparison to other recruiting sources. And I don't recall any complexity problems that we've run into.
Yeah. Yeah. What I would foot stomp is we try to keep the business stuff and the people stuff, right? Like we commit, we're going to deliver a person who's going to go through 6 months of training and have a CompTIA Security Plus. It's going to show up at any company they're hired day one with as much removal of imposter syndrome and confidence to deliver as they possibly can within that piece. Over the course of that 12 months, to Raphael's point, we'll check in with the apprentices, we check in with the hiring managers to provide that support and mentorship. And additional to answer your question, Serena, at the 90-day mark, we generally will add an additional certification. We'll talk to each member and think, okay, what is Rick going to do at the end of this apprenticeship program? What role or function think they're going to do? And we'll add an additional certification that's aligned with that path that they're going to do, which is part of that providing. So when they finish with us, there's a Sec Plus, an additional certification earned, and their departmental credential beyond it. But a really important part is foot stomping that part with the employers is how are you incorporating this into your best practices? And with that, I think go ahead. Sorry.
I'll just add to Susan's question real fast. The Sec Plus is the visible end of the apprentice training, but there are soft skills during that 14, 16-week period that CyberUp really focuses on. So for a catchphrase or catchword, the apprentices come in shovel ready. They're not just green, they're ready to go, and you can put them to work on day one. So that's a huge advantage.
I would also say just ask your employer partners multiple questions, right? Like I know next year going into 2026, we have to change how we do things to support Centene because their needs have changed, right? They're looking at more what a tier 2 apprenticeship would look like to upskill. So we could either just like, we're not going to work with Centene this year, or reimagine how we would create a tier 2 program and go and adjust what we're going to do for them to be able to deliver and still support their practices. So they evolved to us. We make sure we stay on top of trends and evolve with the workforce here and really lean into that stuff. So I know we're at time, Harry, so I want to say thank you to everybody, one of the panelists for joining today. Thank you to everybody who attended, and I want to give a big thanks to Apprenticeship for America, one, for your leadership on just apprenticeship nationally, and two, for giving us the opportunity to talk today.
Thanks, Tony. I'm sure we could spend another hour talking about this. But yeah, thanks, guys. I think I just want to highlight something Rob Thiel said at the end. You know, we've got no complaints. We haven't had any friction at all. That really speaks to the great work that Tony and his team are doing, and that's how it should be. And that's why, you know, we think intermediaries play such a valuable role in this space. But yeah, thanks to Tony and the panel for taking the time to talk and share their experiences and their expertise in this space. And thank you everyone for attending.
Thank you, guys.
We'll close out there.